Hi, this is Laura Holyoke, and I have a PowerPoint for you going over reviewing the structural lens or structural frame. So looking through a structural lens is really nice. Right now you'll notice that it's just all of the non-human aspects of an organization, and therefore usually the most rational and visible manifestations in an organization. So when you think of structure, to think of building blocks. What do we put in place first? What gets changed in restructuring? Well, it usually has little to do with the actual individuals in an organization. Structural change is usually the easiest kind of change and changes to make in an organization. So the right combination of goals, roles, relationships, and coordination is essential to organizational performance. If structure is overlooked, an organization often misdirects energy and its resources, and sometimes, quite often actually, it fails as a result. We read about this in Bowman and Deal, but every organization has differentiation. So decisions have to be made about who does what, certain tasks, divisional labor. How are we going to allocate the work that needs to be done in this organization? And then the integration of those tasks, so how the what gets done. And the coordination is usually grouped in some formation. So it could be grouped by function. That is, so we're grouped in higher education institutions by function in terms of academic departments or drawing a blank. Student services. Also time could be the function, whether we works in shifts, day shifts, night shift, swing shift. Could be divided into certain products. So could be that a canning company, it's one division or one product division works on canned drinks, another one works on bottled drinks. Could be by customer, client, so different hospital wards. Things like pediatrics or intensive care or maternity are often divided by that. Also schools, elementary and high school. Then place, oftentimes geographic regional offices. These are also state offices and sometimes government agencies. And then process to complete. Could be the complete flow of work, from ordering something, maybe that for your home, to complete setup in your home. So integration, coordination also happens vertically and horizontally. So vertical coordination, the easiest, usually a chain of command to go from top to bottom. There are also rules and policies for predictable and consistent behavior, and then planning and control systems. We're going to talk about more of these a little bit here in the PowerPoint. And then lateral coordination. So this is usually less formal in organizations, usually run by meetings or task force. Coordinating roles, there's some matrix structures that you read about in Bowman and Deal, as well as networks. So how they're set up. A lot of people think about the organization chart in terms of both lateral and vertical coordination. Bowman and Deal talk about structural imperatives, and these, every organization needs to respond to these, or actually automatically respond to them. So you can see both, they talk about these in depth, how the size and age of an organization, as they grow older and larger, the complexity and formality increase. That the core process or technologies must align with the structure. The environment on the outside tends to drive how the organization works on the inside, and so on. Something that's pretty important when we talk about organizations is that every organization has a core process, also called its technology. and organizations transform raw materials into finished products. Bowman and Deal talk about how these are college students and how universities really have two core processes. One of those is research and the other one is teaching. So the inputs may be uneducated students, and the technology or core process here is educating students, and the output are graduates. Another way to look at inputs and outputs in technology is that inputs is always raw material. And then what happens inside the organization, the technology, is the throughput. There's two kinds of technologies in every organization. There's a core technology and then there's support technology. So core technologies answers really what an organization does, what everything else is hinged on in an organization. Research and teaching. That's the product. It produces a product. Where support technology is something that helps support that core technology. If you think about things like facilities and ground maintenance, things like food services on campuses, that's the support technology that helps the core technology function. And often when the environment on the outside gets crazy, the organization buffers its core technology first. So it used to be 50 years ago that higher education institutions, the core technology included grounds maintenance. It included the dorms and the food service that it served during meetings and to students, where now oftentimes that is the support technology. And of course, every support technology has its own core technology. Charles Handy wrote about Shamrock organizations quite a while ago. And he wrote, and this is pretty true, that what we've moved towards are having core workers in organizations, and then two other kinds of workforces. And one is that contractual fringe. So in a higher education institution, the contractual fringe are people, organizations that we hire on contract to do something specific, and flexible workforce is usually hired on maybe just for a season or just to do something that not always needs to be done. So contractual fringe may be painting of buildings. Flexible workforce may be, again, ground maintenance. Bowman and Deal talk about structural dilemmas. And I think these are pretty good. Also really good if you're looking at an organization to see if any of these dilemmas are happening, because they can cause issues in organizations, and by restructuring can often address these issues. And if you watch the Deborah Warner's Prodia, do you see any of these? The differentiation versus integration, gap versus overlap, people being underused or overloaded with work, people clear about what their job is, or are they allowed any creativity in their job? So on you go, but they're great questions to ask and look at in terms of structural issues. So some information on planning and control systems. These are the internal control systems in every organization. And it's how we do business within organizations. Really has, again, little to do with individuals themselves, but more about the structure. So how are employees selected and hired? Who supervises? What's the supervision or hierarchy, if you will? Personnel evaluation. How are people evaluated and by whom? How is training and staff development handled? Rewards and incentives. Accountability, output and quality measures. How do those get done? and then program assessment. Let's see if I can still move down here. Decision making is also a structural component, although this is usually decided, sometimes it's decided by the leaders or supervisors in an organization, but sometimes there's a structure that controls the decision making, who gets to make the decisions, what information they are given, how the decisions will be made, are they private or confidential? And then also resource control. Who controls money in an organization, information, skills, the time, calendars, and schedules. So I just said who controls it, but usually this is determined by positions in an organization. So one of the key concepts of the structural frame is that organizational problems originate from inappropriate structures or inadequate systems, not people. We'll get to the people in our other lenses and frames. But they can be resolved through restructuring or even developing new systems within the system. It's very key that organizations have resources that we just talked about, the time, the money, energy, information. It said that an organization has to have slack resources. So slack resources are above what you need to get just the job done. You need these to innovate and keep an organization alive. So something to think about. Thank you so much for your time today. I believe this is my last slide. I appreciate you being here.